We're live. Hey, it's WeatherBrains, episode number 680 for January 28th, 2019. This is the pre-show, the magical time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say extremely outrageous things. So, Bill, where are you this evening?
Hello, my AirPods are connecting. Can you hear me, Dr. Spin? There we go. Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
So,
what if it doesn't snow, James? What are we going to do?
Probably won't snow a flake. You know that.
I don't like looking at the radar, and there's not a snowflake in sight.
No, ain't nothing gonna happen. You know that. It's all you media people trying to get people whipped into a frenzy.
That's what it is.
Yeah, the haters are. But it happens every time there's a snow scare. Whether you're right,
can I get a can of your troll spray that you have over there?
Whether you're wrong. Yeah, this could go horribly wrong, but any snow forecast could go horribly wrong. I mean, it's like,
I need to go back and count up every snow event of my entire life, because I bet it's. What do you think it is for us, James? You think we've had 50 snow events in our life?
I've had more than that.
I don't know. Not many. I bet it's not many more than 50.
I don't know.
Dr. John Nace real quick while we're tapping.
And I'm going to be, we're going on TV at like 2:30 a.m. and staying on forever. I don't know if one of you guys can do the morning.
Yeah, I'll do it. I've got to be up anyway. So yeah, we'll do it. No problem.
Thank you. We're doing TV from like 2:30 until 9 a.m.
Good. Well, we'll have someone to keep us company. I should have sent that out to all the other people too, shouldn't I?
And for those that don't know, this is the 28th of January, 2019, and there is a winter storm warning for parts of the southern states. And
so are you going to go home and try to sleep for a little bit, or are you going
to? They actually have a room over here at the La Quinta. Unfortunately, not the Homewood Suites, but the La Quinta. But it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that's a nice La Quinta. You know what that means, don't you, in Spanish?
I have no earthly idea what that means.
You don't? Well,
No.
It used to mean next to Denny's, but now it doesn't. I mean, now it doesn't anymore. That's an old hotel bet.
Now, if there's a Denny's, that would make me really happy.
Now, what's your favorite dish at a Denny's? The moons over my hammy, or my favorite, the Superbird?
I can't write. I've not been in a Denny's in probably 30 years.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It's kind of a touch and go on Denny's from time to time now. That Superbird's the best club sandwich in the history of late night diners.
Wow. Yeah, I just, the whole media thing, the whole thing makes me a little uncomfortable.
The whole media?
Yeah, like all the TV stations, like some of the local stations started going wall to wall at 3:00 this afternoon for 1 to 2 inches of snow.
Woohoo! That's when you're desperate.
And I'm not blaming anybody at those local stations because they're told to do that by management. But, with every one of these things, every time it seems to be more and more where there's no voice of sanity. A couple inches of snow, it's okay. This is not the blizzard of '93.
Enjoy
the Snowmageddon thing. It's going to be very short term. The sun comes out in the afternoon. It just and the hype that builds up into this thing going on for days and days, and it wears you, it beats you down. I mean, I'm just beat down, and the thing hadn't even started yet. So I got to stay up
Exactly.
all night and do 8 hours of live television for a couple inches of snow. But we'll get through it. It's okay. But yeah,
It's
they're
going to
already
all be
calling.
worth it, James. I promise you, it's going to be worth it. I know something you don't know.
Oh,
I can't tell you.
it's like the when you're a pitcher and the batter winks at you.
Yep.
Like he
I'm
knows
winking.
something you don't know.
I'm winking.
Um,
Oh, Dr. John Scala's joining us.
Oh, hello.
Hello, hello.
I was-
bringing Dr. Neese with you?
Yeah, he's down the road just a piece.
I think I invited him. Did you get my email?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, you invited him.
Okay. Okay, good.
and also, just for you guys, I've got live cut-ins in the 9 o'clock hour, so I'm going to hit the recorded segments probably early in the show, and I'll just kind of bop in and out.
Okay.
There's panic in the streets, John. We might see an inch of
man.
snow down here.
Oh,
1
man.
inch. Panic in the streets.
Well,
Our
as history
annual
tells us,
ritual.
that causes a problem sometimes.
Yeah, Jeff Craven.
Only problem going to be if this one doesn't happen. That's going to be the only problem.
Yeah, Jeff Craven sent me a note. He's doing the national blend of models,
Yeah.
and he sent me some data that doesn't really show a lot here. It's like-
Yeah. The new NAMs are absent of snow nearly.
yeah, and
I'm a
and
little
the
concerned.
I have been concerned about this from day one. Of course, I'm concerned about all of them. But again, you got people that are, this is what all the schools have shut down. The major
they just
universities
missed
and
by
colleges
12 o'clock. Yeah.
have shut down. And
How long are they closed for? A month?
yeah, they'll open up in September.
Troy. Hey, Aubrey.
Hi. Sorry, guys. I never got the little ring on my phone, so I did not even realize what time it was.
Yeah. Right. Dr. Neese doesn't know about us. That's the scary thing.
Good
I found a
evening,
new thing to
everyone.
chase. I'm going to stop chasing weather. I'm going to chase trains from now on.
Chase
There you
trains.
Do it.
What do you do when you catch one?
Yeah.
It was, I just found this thing called virtual rail fan. It's like 52 train cameras from around the country. You could put
Well,
9
Bill, you need to
trains.
come. You need to
I
come.
know. One of the cameras I look at is the horseshoe.
Strasbourg.
Yeah, I've been to the Glitzen tunnels. Have you been to the Glitzen tunnels?
No.
They're right there west of Altoona.
But Strasbourg, we still got that working rail line. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
fantastic to ride that train.
I'm coming up there. Go to Scranton, to Steamtown.
There you go. That's where my son goes to school.
There you go. All right, not feeling good about Dr. Neese here.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Scott had a good hangout with him, so I sent the email, and you came in through the email, John.
Yeah, I did. It worked.
So
And I did too.
Yeah, good. And there's Nate Johnson. Wow. I was talking to Troy Heller today. He's going to be on April 15th, and he was asking, well, who are the regular panelists now? And well, we got Nate back. We got Dr. John back. We added Troy.
Ooh, I'm excited about that Graphic John show in there.
Ooh.
Is that awesome?
22 below tomorrow night in Chicago. I was just looking up ASUS when
Just a little
James
chill.
rang us up.
Just a little chill.
And we're not even going to be setting any record lows here.
Mm-mm.
No,
I mean,
not
we're-
us either.
Yeah, we're kind of close, but not even really close enough.
I forgot to mention that last week on the 21st, that was the date of the all-time record low in Harrisburg.
Oops.
94 was minus 22.
That was
Meanwhile-
1994.
1994, minus 22 on the 21st of January.
Meanwhile, I've got a news director in Chicago asking me how long is it safe for their reporters to be out in the cold the next couple of mornings.
Wow.
We have to ask that question.
I think it's a fair question. I appreciated her asking, actually. I
At
thought
least
it was,
they are asking, to be
You know,
honest.
and I told her,
And
this
Nate,
is
how long is that? How long is that, Nate?
The counsel that I gave her was
Yeah.
no longer than it takes to go from the car to the building.
That's what I'm proud. Thank you, sir.
So, and I said, do look lives, do, live DeGero shots, whatever, but don't, no outside. They'd already whacked a bunch of stuff. They're already ahead of the curve, but she was just confirming. And
I thought that was a rhetorical question.
oh no, she was dead serious.
Oh, man.
I mean, you're talking about with wind chills in the 40 below.
Yeah.
You're talking 2 to 5 minutes for frostbite and exposed skin. That's
I don't even know how you can breathe.
That's,
to be honest.
I mean, that is permanent damage to your skin at 5 minutes.
That's
So-
a workers' comp problem right there.
Yeah, so they were being very serious, and I said, "Look, I wouldn't do anything. Like I said, nothing longer than it takes to go from the parking lot to the car."
And this will be the.
And let's welcome our television viewers watching on cable channels and over the air, parts of the Deep South. We'll talk about the weather situation here on the show, but this is WeatherBrains. It's Monday night. It's 8:30 Central. You know what that means. Hey, John, can you hear us? Not.
I got
Scala.
you, James.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
See all that Penn State stuff.
Let's get
too
this
there,
sucker
I think.
started here. All right, recorders are going, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, it's WeatherBrains. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is episode number 684, Monday, the 28th of January, 2019. We're in the midst of winter time, and we, down here in the Deep South, are under a winter storm warning as we do this program. Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen. Down here, the winter storm criteria, Bill Murray, it's what, 2 inches?
Yeah, a dusting.
I was about to ask, what's the difference between the advisory and the storm warning down there?
1 inch.
Yeah, but everybody down here is like,
And
oh,
the winter
it's been a
storm
weather
warning is
advisory.
2
We got
inches.
Jeff. Yeah.
So anyway, we're in the mass panic mode down here. It's a very interesting social thing to watch. I wish Kim was on the show. I'd love her to talk about it is just so interesting, and with every year it's a little different. And but anyway, that we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We got Aubrey Urbanowitz. So Aubrey, you are in Harrisonburg, and the cold air is lurking to the north. How much of that will you see this week?
Oh, too much. Too much. We are the Arctic front is going to cross tomorrow, so we've got some rain and snow showers, minimal accumulation, and then the cold and the wind, the fierce winds. I mean, we're talking gusts up to 40, 50. That's going to put wind chills near and below zero the whole day Wednesday and into Thursday morning. And then it's so cold Thursday, 5-7 mile an hour breeze on Thursday. It's just going to send those wind chills, straight back into the low teens.
So John Scala, how bad will it be where you are up there?
We're going to be a little colder, it looks like. We're not going to moderate quite as much. Well, I'm thinking 0 on Thursday morning with a wind chill of about -15. It will be colder up in Penn State, though, as Dr. John East can describe. But Thursday and Friday will moderate back towards 20 degrees. On Friday, it'll be tropical. But
by Saturday.
And Saturday. But good thing about this pattern, it's progressive. It's not like it's setting up and being with us for 7 days.
By the way,
it looks much warmer.
I'd like to nominate "We're Going to Be a Little Colder" as our early show title contender.
Nate, how cold's going to be in North Carolina?
It's going to be cold, but not nearly as bad as y'all are dealing with. We're looking at maybe a couple of days tail into the week with temps having a hard time getting out of the above freezing category or getting into the above freezing category. But it's really not going to be terrible. It'll be cold for a day, and then it'll be about it. And we might have wind chills in the 20s for a few hours, a couple of mornings. But we're going to get off easy here. The thing that's freaking everybody out here is, this cold front coming in with a sharp gradient, with a little bit of precip lagging behind the cold air. So we'll wind up having the rain potentially endings, a little bit of snow tomorrow night to 6, 7, 8 o'clock. And so the DOT has been aggressive at brining the roads. And of course, you see those salt streaks going down the highway and everybody gets antsy. But I think it'll be much ado about very little.
Okay, awesome. Well, our two guys in Texas are laughing at us. Troy, are you laughing?
No, I was going to talk to Kevin, in just a couple of minutes. I mean, this is horrible for Texas. I mean, the front past Austin. Watch it, Kevin. The front past Austin about 5 to 6:30 this evening. And as I turn around and look at the official National Weather Service MMTS station here, we're down to 54.9.
The humanity.
God.
The humanity of it all. And I don't know. I imagine that Kevin's like buried in snowdrifts up in Wichita Falls. So
We're forecasting 70 for Sunday.
okay.
All right, I'm coming to visit. Get your spare bedroom ready. I'm coming in.
We'll have a couple of blankets set up for you in the corner of the garage.
Come on.
I don't need a blanket with that. Just give me a pillow.
Meanwhile, Brad Panovich in Charlotte is advertising a couple of nights later this week as 3-dog nights, as in you're going to need 3 dogs on your bed to stay warm.
So is anybody old enough to remember the musical act 3 Dog Night?
Oh,
Probably the only one on the
yeah.
show.
Mama told me not to come.
One is the loneliest number. Wow. All right. Well, Bill Murray, let's bring in our guest. I'm excited about this show.
I have a thing. I have a new thing. Can I share the new thing?
Yeah, share it.
Yeah,
Go.
we've discovered a new thing. You've all heard of seasonal affective disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you don't get enough sunshine and you get depressed and you got to have light therapy and all that kind of thing. Well, we were looking, our weekend guy, Michael Bowling, was looking out at the approaching boring featureless stratus cloud deck that was coming toward the tower cam. And we've discovered he has something called CAD. It's CAD. And we've described it as convective affective disorder.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
It's a type of depression that's related to persistent subsidence in a person's local region.
Exactly.
In other words, he's wanting thunderstorms.
Yeah.
There
And
you
if
go.
you follow the Bureau of, Australian Meteorology on Instagram, you can actually get your fill.
Oh, there you go. I'll send him that way.
If they're in their summer season.
There you go.
I think at one point years ago, Kevin, J.B. Elliott was on the National Subsistence Chase Team.
Right.
So, you could,
I think remembering that was one of the things that led me to that title as we were discussing it in the office today.
awesome. All right, Bill, go.
All right. Well,
Sorry,
tonight's guest, no, thank you, Kevin. Tonight's guest, WeatherBrains, the teaching professor of meteorology, the associate head of the undergraduate program of meteorology at the Penn State University, Dr. John Neese. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bill. I should mention, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
We actually have a little bit of CAD here in central Pennsylvania, situated where Penn State is. If there's ever a westerly component to the wind and convection is approaching from the west, it downslopes here into this valley, and you can see it on radar. Approaching lines of thunderstorms will often break up, and then they'll redevelop as they get southeast of what we call Step Mountains, which is about 20 miles to the southeast of here. So we have a little bit of that right here.
Do you find yourself depressed because of it?
I think it depresses a lot of the students.
I bet you don't put that in the catalog, do you, Dr. Neese?
We do not.
No.
Well, it's been too long since we've talked. How have you been?
Doing great, Bill. I mean, we always have a great group of students here, and a lot of them are interested in TV when they come in, and by the time they graduate, they found a lot of other interesting things you can do with this degree. And I think that's, part of what a university should be about. The kids get interested and psyched about the weather, in many cases because of extreme weather, because of the ability to communicate it, and then they get here and they find out they can do a lot more with their degree.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting comment, because we see that in the kids that we get to mentor at the National Weather Association annual meeting every year, Dr. John. They are a very diverse group and do have a lot of diverse interests. I've noticed that. Have you noticed that, Dr. John?
Oh, absolutely, Bill. You know what's interesting? I think the percentage of those students that are really, really interested in getting into broadcasting, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that number is going down.
It's because of James Spann. He's scared them all senseless.
Get out of the business, you old cranks. Yeah.
I try every other fall to convince a group of about a dozen to get out of the business, and at least one or two take my advice on it.
Wow. So the arrow's pointing down on meteorologists and television on the WeatherBrains crew.
Although I will say, and Dr. John, you guys do a nice job of this at Penn State, but I think a lot of the things that people learn in a broadcast-centric program about taking scientific weather information and making it accessible to people who aren't experts and don't want to be experts, that is a critical skill. And if anything, that skill set and the need for that skill set is absolutely on the rise. And so I had a couple of students actually in the last iteration of my broadcast meteorology class here at NC State specifically take the class not wanting anything to do with television. They told me day one, they don't want to do TV. End of the class, they want to do TV. They took the class specifically for the presentation skills, the thought processes about packaging this information in a way that, we as educators in a university setting do a nice job of really institutionalizing students to present weather in formatted briefings and the forecast funnel and everything. And that's great for talking to other meteorologists. It's bloody terrible talking like that way to people who are not meteorologists. And so this is an opportunity for them to really reshape the way they look at weather and find ways to talk with other people about the weather, whether it's clients for an emergency management company or folks on broadcast or, companies like AccuWeather that have private clients, they want to cut to the quick and want to know what their options are. And that skill set really is on the rise.
Well, I want to ask John, is it too late for you to talk me out of it? Can I come up there and roll?
Well, I don't really think of our program at Penn State as being broadcast centric. The truth of the matter is, if you look at the stats, in any given year, the number of students that go into broadcast varies between 5%, maybe 1 out of every 20, to as high as maybe 15%. It varies a lot. But we've been in the last 5 years very successful in placing those students. So there are positions available. But the main point I wanted to make is we have a series of courses. It's now been expanded to 3. We call them weather communications.
Yes.
And these are courses, Nate, that I think deliver what you're suggesting.
Yep.
They are not exclusively for broadcast meteorologists. In fact, over the course of 15 weeks, we'll do 2 weeks on forensic meteorology. We'll do a week on branding yourself. I'll bring in an expert from the College of Communications to talk about branding. We'll do a series on industrial meteorology and meteorology in the courtroom. So focusing on those areas where you do have to translate the knowledge. Yes, there's a section on television, of course. But then the third in the series is focused more on television. Mm-hmm. So we accept what we call WeatherCom 1 and WeatherCom 2, no matter what specialization you have in the program. We want students to take those classes, not just if you're into broadcasting.
Yeah, and those are exactly what I was talking about when we were designing the broadcast course here at NC State. That was that was something that we looked at as something we wanted to model against. And when I went through the program, and even today, there really isn't. There is a capstone requirement that requires a project, that requires essentially publishing a paper, doing a presentation, all of the scientific stuff that is important to, moving our field forward. And for a long time, NC State was really a grad student factor. You're cranking out undergrads and 75% were going to grad school, Penn State, Florida State, A&M, OU, you name it. And so the public communication skills weren't that big of a deal. But as we've turned in the last 15 or 20 years and starting pushing out more folks who are going into the weather service, where DSS is becoming a very big thing, and folks who are more interested in broadcast, those communication skills are somewhat important. And at this point, the class I teach is the only game in town for that, for better or for worse. And I know that we've got a couple of faculty members that really push it on students who even aren't interested in broadcast, but who feel like they need to have that communication angle, whether they're going into TV or private sector or anything else.
I think we're a little bit fortunate at Penn State, if I might just add. We actually have a weather program, a 15-minute weather program that goes statewide through the entire state every weekday. And we're starting to incorporate students more into that program. It's called Weather World. We've been doing it here for quite a few decades. And it gives students an opportunity, for example, to do features, to do packages, and to even host the show. So it's more than just doing the forecast, but it's acting in other capacities to spread the knowledge.
John, I've been on that show a couple of times. It's a great opportunity for your students.
Well, we got to get you back up here, John. Once we pave the roads here in central Pennsylvania.
Right. That's how you keep the speeds down, John.
That's a good point.
So, Dr. John, those young folks that are involved in that program, how can we see that show if we're not in Pennsylvania? Is it on the internet, or is it available
it's live streamed
in other forms?
It's live streamed at 5:30 on the local public broadcasting station that is our conduit to the wider statewide audience. That's appropriately named WPSU. So you can get it at 5:30 live streamed, and to make a long story short, it will be available on demand very soon.
Okay. Even archive shows, or just the new ones going forward?
I didn't catch that, Bill.
Will it be archive shows too, or just the new shows going forward?
That's a good question. We're still working on that.
So you're doing that show. Anything else cool that you're working on that you're doing? Is that you're producing the segment on WeatherWise still?
Right. So I've been very fortunate. When I moved here from the Weather Channel in 2005, we had started a little package at the Weather Channel that my producer, Mike McMacken, who I still stay in touch with, a great guy, still lives in Atlanta, App State grad. He was my behind-the-scenes guy. We started a little 1-minute feature called Dr. Neese's Notebook, and which I thought was a lot of fun. And when I got here to Penn State, we decided to mimic that in a way, and we expanded it into a 3-minute weekly feature that we call WeatherWise. And I just passed the 500th episode of WeatherWise. And these are short little 3-minute informational videos. This week's will be on the polar vortex. Just to give you a sense, we try to keep it relevant and timely, and add some science, some good science as well.
So that's a video program
between Groundhog Day and the polar vortex.
Yeah, Groundhog Day's coming up. It looks like 6 more weeks of winter for us, probably. If the
Where do we find that, John?
Yeah.
Well, I archive all my features. I actually gave the website to Scott Martin, and I think he can make it available. If you just Google my name, JONNESE, followed by the word WeatherWise, spelled WeatherWhys. So not the Ben Franklin spelling, but okay. WeatherWise. You'll find the archive.
That is very cool. You need to syndicate that and get it out to the greater world there.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
That's good. I sent some good things. I've got 2 Dr. Johns on here, both worked at the Weather Channel back to back. Talk for a minute about that.
It was hard to replace John Scala. Trust me.
Oh man,
I bet it was. But I'm sure you filled the bill. I can't remember that far back, Dr. Mason.
Well, I don't know if John knows this, but more than once, and this is kind of an inside joke, but more than once, John, Marshall Cease called me you. And let's just leave it at that.
Wow. I'll take that as a compliment.
Take it as a compliment.
That's bad. That's when your wife calls her old boyfriend. You're name. That's not good.
Don't go there.
On to meddling now. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Talk about those days, Dr. John Scala. Talk about your days at the Weather Channel. We don't spend enough time talking about that.
Wow, Bill, that takes me back even longer than John, Dr. John Neese. Yeah, as we were saying, John followed me, and I remember the conversation that he and I had over the phone about my expectations about the program and my experiences. And I just remember overall being tired a lot because that program took a lot out of me. I went in early and often stayed late. And when the weather was active anywhere in the country, you were there. You were monitoring it. You were basically tasked with identifying those areas of the country from east to west that might be subject to threatening weather.
Yeah.
And didn't suffer from a lot of the same limitations and things that they have today, I bet, probably.
What do you mean by that, Bill?
In terms of, like, regularly scheduled programming that, they don't want you to preempt, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. And a lot of discussion still about, well, when do we cut in to cover something? Is this important enough? You're right. Those discussions went on then, and they continue.
I got for John and John both, just from someone who sits here and watches the Weather Channel. Did you have to make those? How does those decisions? I knew how those decisions were making local television. You could do them pretty quickly as soon as you get the camera crew in. But how quick could those decisions be made at the Weather Channel, guys? When you had severe weather, we need to get on the air.
Yeah, my memory was it was pretty quick.
Okay,
I don't recall having to go through a lot of discussion. I think if the producer was monitoring the weather situation and came up to me and said, "What do you think?" and I would say, "I think it's time to cut in. I don't think we can wait any longer." We got on pretty quick.
Good. I just wondered.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I would say I agree with John. Most of the time, though, those decisions, given that my shift was 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., the number of those decisions that had to be made at that time of the day was much smaller than in the evening. So, but
That's
when
true.
we had to make a decision like that, it didn't take long. That's for certain.
Okay.
So, Dr. John Neese, were you responsible, Dr. John, too? Were you responsible for all forms of hazardous weather? Did you just do convective?
Yeah.
Did you do winter? What did you do?
All forms. It was pretty much the story of the day, given the season. So everything from hurricanes. I was laughing when John mentioned you can never really turn it off, especially during hurricane season, because you could literally be called in at any time. And given that my birthday falls in the middle of September, I do remember many disruptive attempts to celebrate my birthday. It's true. You could just never turn it off. And I do remember distinctly, I'm a big sports fan. I'll be the first to admit it. Not just Penn State sports.
We couldn't tell.
Sports. And given that you needed to be in at 5 o'clock, it was really hard to stay up for any late night sporting event.
That's true.
I mean, it's just a fact of life. So there were just some events that got relegated to well, at that time, I guess it was more like the VCR.
That's right.
Well,
I don't know that we had a DVR at that time.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So tell us some funny Weather Channel stories, Dr. Neese. There's got to be some inside baseball that you share with us that we haven't heard before.
Well, other than being mistakenly called John Scala, which I take as a compliment, I do remember one time in an airport. My whole family was with me, so they can verify. So John may remember. I'm sure John remembers. One of the hosts at that time with Marshall Cease was a woman named Heather Tesh.
Sure.
And so I'm walking through the airport. I think we were on the shuttle bus from the terminal back to the parking garage. And a gentleman comes up to me and says, "I really enjoy the show, etc." And he called me John Tesh. Who, of course,
Show title.
is a television personality unto himself, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
And more radio, but
More radio now, right? Yeah.
But of course, this was obviously a mishmash between myself and Heather. And it made me laugh. I'm not sure that's what you were looking for, Bill, but it's funny.
That rates up there.
I mean, to me, being able to hang out with people like, and these are names that may not mean a lot to some of our younger viewers and listeners, but Mr. Geography, Bill Keneally, who knew every street in every state.
That's right.
Rich Johnson, who just knows all there is about the tropics. I considered this a real honor. And then to hang around experts like Greg Forbes, who had been a friend already, but then I got to reconnect with Greg at the Weather Channel, and Heidi Collin, who's now at Climate Central, and Paul Cosin, who's back at NCEP, and the hurricane expert at that time, Steve Lyons. I think Steve he may be in the Weather Service now in Texas.
Yeah,
He's
MIC
in San Angelo.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a highlight for me.
Yeah.
And to think that I could bring something to the table there with these folks, and then of course the folks that don't get the credit who are behind the scenes, like Stu Ostro. I mean, Stu, of course, has made quite a name for himself, even though nobody ever sees him on television.
Right.
But he really makes that place run. And my direct supervisor at the time was a gentleman named Keith Westerledge. And Keith had been on air at the time. These are great meteorologists and great people. And to me, that is the lasting memory of my time at the Weather Channel. Just the great people, some in front of the camera, but many not in front of the camera, that I got to hang out with. And it was really a pleasure from that standpoint working there.
Yeah. So had you done much television before then, Dr. Neese?
Well, I guess it depends on the definition of much. I had been the weekend meteorologist at WTOV in Steubenville, Ohio in the early 90s. I also worked briefly in Youngstown. And then I did some fill-in at WBRE in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. And then when I moved to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, we partnered with both the PBS affiliate there, WHYY, and we did some work with the NBC affiliate. I just know of them as NBC 10.
WCAU, NBC 10.
WCAU, yeah, and Glenn Schwartz there.
Hurricane Schwartz.
Yeah. We did some, WCAU would send over one of their meteorologists. It was either Glenn or Kathy Orr, who's now, I believe, at the Fox in Philadelphia, or Bill Henley.
Bill Henley, yep.
Who's still at NBC 10. They'd come over to the Franklin Institute. And I mean, imagine the thrill if you're a third grade kid coming to the Franklin Institute and you get ushered into an auditorium that seats about 100. And in walks Kathy Orr or Glenn Schwartz to pair with little old me, who nobody really knew who I was at the time. And we would do weather shows. And we would make clouds with liquid nitrogen. And we would show tornado videos. I mean, it was a blast. And so while I was to directly answer your question, Bill, while I was in Philadelphia, I did do a little bit of television, but I was never full-time until I went to the Weather Channel.
That's pretty cool. So how did you end up getting that job? How did they find you?
Well, I guess I knew some people there. And it's not as if, I mean, let's be honest, Bill, if you're a little bit in television at that time, who doesn't want to work for the Weather Channel? I mean, we're talking about the early 2000s here. I would say, I mean, the Weather Channel by that time had developed quite a reputation as the place to go for weather.
Right.
And so I had sent a few tapes in, so I was sort of a known quantity to them to some extent. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd actually interviewed there once before and didn't get a job. So I was not new to them.
So were you there after the passing of of John Hope, I guess? And maybe John Scully, you might remember some time with John
I
Hope.
have some really fond memories of John Hope. In fact, my very first day at the Weather Channel was a landfalling hurricane. I think it was Bonnie in North Carolina. So this was August of '98. And I remember that was my very first day. And they were obviously doing live coverage of Hurricane Bonnie. And I remember during a break going up and introducing myself to John Hope and saying, you know, I would really like to learn everything I can from you. And he said to me, all right, stand. He was pointing to the chair next to him. He said, you stand right next to that chair. Don't say a word and watch. And I did. And he meant that, you know, in a very comfortable and a very sincere way.
Yes.
And I did that. I sat there that day and watched him do live cut-ins for the on Hurricane Bonnie. Wow. I mean, as John was saying, it was an experience that I can remember vividly to this day.
With all due respect to both of the doctors, John, on this show, John Hope was far and away my favorite. Maybe a second was Dennis Smith, but John Hope was the man.
Well, you knew when he was there, you were going to be informed. That was for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Those
and you were going to learn something.
Yeah, you always did. I probably learned more during that time, and even when television was still fairly crude in the early days.
I agree, Bill. He had an air about him and a manner in which he could convey, as we were saying, complex information, but with a precision and an understanding that everybody else could understand. And he did it in a manner that was so comforting and so approachable. Yeah, that was his demeanor. He was so approachable.
Well, that was what you always heard about the great Hurricane Center directors of the, you know, back in the 50s and 40s, and the Grady Nortons and those sort of people. They just were almost like weather prophets. They had a different connection, and he seemed to have that.
Yeah, he did. I have very fond memories of him.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I ever overlapped with John. I don't think I ever met him.
Oh, really? Well, I was there when
he died in 2002, didn't he? So it would have been right about that time.
That's right. That's
must have been just before I arrived.
I remember they had hired Steve Lyons to be John's successor, and John didn't want to retire. So they actually had a problem. They had two tropical experts, and how are we going to deal with this? So they traded shifts.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And was Steve's background in tropical meteorology? Because we've had him on the show. I just been so long. Now we've been doing this 13 years. It's hard to remember all the things we've learned along the way. But was his background in tropical meteorology?
Well, I always presumed it was, because when I arrived, he was the tropical expert.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and he was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good. When I moved to Atlanta and I was looking for a house, I stayed with Steve and his family for a couple of weeks. So we would spend the evenings talking about tropical weather, as you might imagine.
Yeah, my years, James, you know Dr. Keith Blackwell really well. Probably some other folks on the show do too. I was lucky enough to meet him in the teletype room of the Weather Service the night Hurricane Allen was making landfall in South Texas in 1980. And we became fast friends after that. And there were a lot of great evenings spent talking hurricanes. And he was, you know, one of the best tropical experts in the world, still is to this day. So those were all good times. So now you got to be the chief meteorologist at the Franklin Institute. Dr. John, tell us what that entails. Is that a position they still have?
So, to the best of my knowledge, no. At this point, they do not. I can say with certainty that had the Weather Channel not invited me to join their team, I would have stayed at the Franklin Institute, because it was a blast. I mean, this is a place that originated in the 1820s. It wasn't a museum at that time. It was more of a school for artisans and craftsmen and engineers. But They actually had a meteorologist back in the 1820s, a guy named James Pollard Espy, who, and for a time, I mean, I don't think a lot of people know this, but for a time, Philadelphia was sort of the center of weather in the United States. And part of it was because of this one gentleman who convinced the Pennsylvania legislature to give him money so he could give instruments to someone in every county in Pennsylvania. And this is in the 1830s. So this is pre-telegraph. So he had to wait to get the data to draw the maps. But you can still look in the Journal of the Franklin Institute in 1836 for what is generally considered to be the first synoptic scale weather map ever drawn. It's got little itty bitty station markers on it and wind vectors. And so, I mean, think about that. This is 1836. And this guy's trying to put together the big picture. And that was just fun for me. I mean, to think that I was part of that history. And there were a couple really famous meteorologists, well, folks who were born and raised in Philadelphia, whose names you might recognize. Dr. Joel Myers, who founded AccuWeather. Conrad Lautenbacher, who was a former head of NOAA.
Right.
And then a couple names in the 60s. You had Wally Canaan, the weatherman, was at the Franklin Institute. He was a big deal. A guy named Dr. Francis Davis was a big deal. So the point is, Philadelphia has always been a place where I think weather's appreciated. And it's a place that gets hurricanes and blizzards and severe thunderstorms. And it was just a great place to work. And they gave me a lot of freedom. We established partnerships with WHYY and NBC 10. I got to write the Philadelphia area weather book while I was there.
How come I don't have that book, Dr. John? That book needs to go in my library.
I have been negligent. That's why you don't have that book.
No,
Did you ever get to meet Terry Gross at WHYY? Fresh Air?
I did. Yes. I was on Fresh Air a couple times.
I'm a little envious.
So, yeah, I would walk down to their studios, it was a bit of a walk from the Franklin Institute. I will kid you not. Yeah, but I had a daily little feature on WHYY on their evening weather show. I still remember my producer there, a woman named Eleanor Ingersoll. Eleanor still lives in Philly. No, those were good times. I mean, and we did I made some exhibits. We did exhibits on ozone pollution. We did exhibits on the history of weather in Philadelphia. So it's just one of those positions that allowed you to do a variety of things. And I look back on those days very fondly. In fact, as you make me speak about these experiences, I've been really blessed with the people that I've worked with, both at the Weather Channel and the Franklin Institute and where I am now. So really fortunate.
Talk a little more about Espy and his role in helping John Henry with the Smithsonian Weather Network in the 1840s.
Right. So Espy eventually left Philadelphia to go to Washington because when the Smithsonian began, I'll probably get the date wrong here, but I think it was around 1850. Sort of the center of weather began to shift toward Washington because the Smithsonian hired a guy named, last name was Henry. Joseph Henry, maybe. He was a New York fellow. And they hired him to be their first director of science or director of meteorology. And so at the Smithsonian, they used to draw weather maps in the 1850s. And so I think Espy saw the writing on the wall, and he went to Washington, where he began to lobby the federal government for money to do a weather network. Which, of course, to you and me today, it's like, duh. I mean, who doesn't need a national weather network? But it was a tougher sell then. And then Espy passed away in 1860. I believe it was 1860. And Then, of course, something really nasty happened to the nation in the 1860s, the Civil War. And that got in the way of, all of a sudden, people weren't so much thinking about the weather as they were this national crisis. And so it took until, as I'm sure some of you guys know, it took another 5 years after the end of the war for Ulysses S. Grant to finally sign the legislation to form what has become the National Weather Service. But I like to think Espy is kind of the guy one of the people who was thinking about these things as early as the 1820s.
Yeah, these are important people in the history of meteorology. Do I remember correctly, Dr. John? Did he have a little bit of a rivalry with Redfield, or is that in my imagination?
Oh no, William Redfield, sure, the great storm debate of the 1840s. Yeah, Espy, he was sort of a classically trained scientist. Redfield, I think, if we had to describe him in today's lingo, he's kind of like a blogger who knows a lot about the weather, but wasn't really trained as a meteorologist. And they, I guess they barnstormed the Northeast. Espy was, I think to shorten the story, Espy believed from the maps he drew that storms were areas where the winds came together or converged. That's what he read from the data. And Redfield, he believed that storms had circulation to them. And so they argued about who was right. Does air come in toward the center of a low, or does it circulate counterclockwise? And we
Spoiler
all know
alert.
that was a little bit of both, which makes me laugh to this day.
Yeah,
they were both partly right.
Mm-hmm. And they called Espy the Storm King, didn't they? How did he earn that?
Well, somebody did. I don't know if it was just Espy, but somebody called him the Storm King. Well, I mean, he wrote a book. I want to say it was in 1840. I love the title, The Philosophy of Storms. I mean, doesn't that just bring together the philosophy of storms? So I guess when you write a book called The Philosophy of Storms, it's okay if they call you the Storm King. I'm sure he didn't discourage it, though I have no hard evidence of that.
I imagine it was
I gotta tell you,
Go ahead.
It's such a coincidence. I actually just recently met one of his distant relatives, purely by coincidence.
Really? Tell us the story.
Well, it's kind of sad. I mean, I was at a funeral, and for a friend locally, and I have never known her maiden name. Her maiden name was Espy.
Wow.
so,
Immediately had something
I'm a meteorologist
to talk about.
Who knows very well James Pollard Espy. So in what I guess could be considered a somewhat inappropriate after the service, though I didn't think so. I mean, and it turned out not to be. I went up to one of the relatives and I said, "Hi, I'm a meteorologist. I knew your sister very well, and I did not know her maiden name." And when she learned I was a meteorologist, she knew exactly why I was there. She knew about James Pollard Espy. So I was just blown away that this was part of their family history. I was humbled and thrilled at the same time to actually meet one of James Pollard Espy's relatives. Anyway,
that's really
can you believe that?
Cool.
No, that's just neat, because these are the legends. I mean, when you start thinking about the folks that really led to us developing the greatest national weather service in the world.
Yeah,
it was these people that were building laying the cornerstones for it. On up through Increase Lapham and lots of people that had a lot to do with that original bill that you were talking about with President Grant.
Well, what always fascinated me about that, if you read the language of the original bill, one of the strong motivations for that was all of the weather-related tragedies on the Great Lakes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you look at the statistics of weather-related Great Lakes shipwrecks, deaths in the 1860s, it's ridiculous. I mean, of course, eventually, with the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, it was all immortalized in a song.
Really?
It took
Exactly.
until the 1970s for that to happen. Although, I mean, I may not be aware of other songs that had been written about that particular topic.
So James, would you say that's one of the greatest weather songs in history?
Top 5 for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I
can
agree.
you think of any others? What are some other ones that come to mind? I'm too tired to think tonight.
And that's a show title right there, by the way. I'm in the same boat as Bill is. And by the way, let me do a quick timeout here because I've got to do television like really early in a few minutes. So I got to roll the recorded segments. We'll come back with Dr. Neese and everybody else, but we're going to roll Tony Rice and Aubrey. If you got some email, I'm going to do that right after Tony, and then we'll come back to Dr. Neese. Y'all hang tight. Much more to go as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Later this week in the pre-dawn hours, look for conjunctions of the moon and several planets. A conjunction is a close approach of two objects in the sky, at least from our perspective here on Earth. You measure them in degrees of angular separation, and they happen every month, especially with the moon. But they're a treat nonetheless because they make it that much easier to spot those planets. Conjunctions happen along an imaginary line in the sky, the ecliptic. This also marks the sun's path through the sky, because most every planet in our solar system and the Earth's moon orbit on a relatively flat plane relative to the sun, just a few degrees at most from this line. While there are constellations all across the night sky, including some in the opposite hemisphere that you've probably never seen before, there is a special set that everyone sees. They all lie along that ecliptic line. Constellations like Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and Ophiuchus, and so on. The 13 constellations of the zodiac. That's right, 13. The Babylonians left out Ophiuchus solely for a tidier set of zodiacal signs which better align to the 12 months of the calendar. Supposedly, each sign represents the time the sun spins in that part of the sky as we move through the year, but even that was fudged to fit. Altering your data to fit your model? Now that doesn't sound very scientific. This week, look for conjunctions with the waning crescent moon in the pre-dawn skies. On Wednesday, January 30th, the 24% illuminated moon will be 6 degrees from Jupiter. On Thursday morning, the 16% illuminated moon will be just 2 degrees from a very bright Venus. But that's here in North America. WeatherBrains listeners in the South Pacific will be able to see the moon pass in front of or occult Venus. On Saturday, February 2nd, the 5% illuminated moon will be just 3 degrees from Saturn. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, let's take a pause here and see if we got anything in the good old email inbox this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks of letters.
All right, the first one comes from Dustin Vargo. I know it's a little bit after the anniversary, but I have a show suggestion. This year was the 20th anniversary of the biggest tornado outbreak in Arkansas history, January 21st, 22nd, 1999. You could bring on Weather Dan on Twitter, who chased the event with KOCO Michael. You could also go into storm chasing in the late 90s into that as well, especially in a place like Arkansas where terrain is obviously such a huge issue. So thank you very much for sending in those suggestions, Dustin. We appreciate that. And Bill, you replied, and I believe this is something we are going to try to put together.
It is on board for next week, as a matter of fact.
On board for
James,
next
we're here.
week.
He could play the breaking news music, and we could break the news that we're going to be talking with most of the folks that he mentions there. Scott Martin's done a great job putting that show together. So that'll be on Monday, February 4th.
Awesome. So stay tuned. All right. So we've got a good show coming in.
And Dr.
next
John
week.
Scala was a big part of that event, so he'll have a lot to share.
I remember that one vividly.
So you'll actually be a weather brain next week, not just a
Okay.
lame brain like the rest of us.
He'll be a big brain. And David Gottschalk sent us in a note. I'm a longtime listener and high school earth science and meteorology teacher. Love the show and listen on the long commute from Chicago to Milwaukee every day to teach. Well, thank you for what you do every day, driving and also teaching. I love to compare upper air data and jet stream models. I get the GFS data, but looking for more Euro data, I'd really love to see the 300 or 250 wind models from the Euro, and looking for some websites. And Dr. John was able to put forth a couple of sites from Arizona, and is it Meteocentre?
Yeah, center. Yeah, it's a media center.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. So thank you, Dr. John, for responding and for passing on that information. And that is what I have. So if you have any email, guest suggestion, or a show topic, what you like about the show, or something you'd like to see, go ahead and shoot us an email at weatherbrains.com. Don't forget to follow us on the Facebook and the Twitter. I think we still have Facebook. I don't know if we still have Facebook.
We just don't tell Kevin about it. That's all.
That's true. But we are on Twitter.
What is this Facebook you're talking about?
Facebook? What?
Yeah, I hear it's making a comeback, Kevin.
It was a great quote. I listened to this podcast. Speaking of which, we mentioned Kara Swisher some time back. Did you ever try and invite her on the show?
No, I thought you were going to do it. I thought.
Well, I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I can't. That's,
I guess
that's the
not.
primary.
Yeah, well,
that's the primary way to get. But she
I
hosts.
think it would be a lot of fun to have, because when to see her talking about him on Frontline was just the best.
Yeah. Well, she's doing a lot of things on him, but she has a show, and I don't want to hijack the show, but she has a show called Pivot that she hosts with a guy named Scott Galloway, who's a serial entrepreneur and now a business professor at NYU, I think. And they get on and rant about things. And he was apparently in Germany last week, some big digital gathering with a bunch of high-powered people, and Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook was there. And she gave this talk, sort of, they're on their apology tour now, and we're sorry, and we're fixing it, and we're listening, and all of the things. And he had the greatest line. Kara asked him, well, what did you think of the talk? And he said, what did he say? He said, I liked the speech better than everybody in the room, and I hated it.
Think about that. Yeah.
So it was not a well-received speech, but I'm sorry to hijack the conversation.
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Aubrey, for the email inbox report there. That was very good. So, Dr. John, can you stick around with us a little bit longer tonight, or we're not running up on your bedtime or anything, are we?
All good here.
That's how So, we're talking about, Cleveland Abbey and Joseph Henry and all these folks, but, these folks, some of them had roles at famous institutions like the Franklin Institute, because if I remember correctly, and Dr. Cleveland Abbey came from like the Cincinnati Astronomical Society or something, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Cleveland, but I do remember Cincinnati as a place where he spent a lot of time. Yes.
So go back to the history of the Franklin Institute. Were there, other important meteorologists that came along before you that were like you in the process, and did they play roles in the local, in the local weather scene or in the national weather scene as they went along?
Well, the one name that comes to mind, in the 60s and the 70s, the gentleman named Wally Canaan. They called him Wally Canaan, the weatherman. He had a whole setup in the Franklin Institute, and he must have done his broadcasts from there. Wally was one of the early awardees of the AMS seal of approval. I think if you look at that list, the AMS list, you will see two names on there, and I mentioned them, Wally's and Dr. Charles Davis. Charles Davis, yeah, I think it was Charles Davis. And I don't remember their exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure Davis was a top 10 on the AMS, what used to be called the seal of approval. It's since been modified, but the AMS publishes that list occasionally in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. I'm sure you can find it online as well. So those two, and particularly Wally, come to mind as folks who kind of put the Franklin Institute on the map in the late 20th century as a place that did weather.
That is really cool. I just one-clicked on Amazon your book, the Philadelphia Weather Book, and I'll have it by Thursday, it says, which is just amazing to me. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I just did it.
Please don't buy it, Bill. I'll send you a copy.
Well, no, it's already bought, so I'm not going to let you send me a book.
Well,
it's something this important is going to be in my collection. I'm going to earn
Let me
it.
point out one thing about the Franklin Institute that you may not know. The Franklin Institute is a co-op weather observing site. And in 1996 was the location of the official measurement for what remains Philadelphia's largest snowstorm on record. 30.7 inches, I believe.
Wow.
It was measured at the Franklin Institute. And when I was there at the museum, there was a panel convened by, I think, the MIC at Mount Holly at that time. I think Gary was the MIC at that time.
Yeah.
Gary Zakowski convened a panel to talk about the legitimacy of that measurement.
Yeah.
Because it had come into question in terms of, was that real? And I served on that panel, and the conclusion was that there was not enough evidence to suggest it was not real or that it was not accurate. Kind of reminds me of when NFL plays go to replay and the referees come back.
No conclusive evidence.
Confirmed, but they say that it stands. But that measurement, and Philly's come close to beating that since then, but that remains the snowstorm of record, January 7th and 8th, 1996. I'm sure many of you remember that story.
Oh, man, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So talk about the other events that are memorable in Philadelphia that were sort of the headlines of the book.
Oh, well, Floyd. I mean, I couldn't get home 1999. There were too many trees down. It was hard to get home. The Schuylkill River flooded. That was big. There were several tornadoes also. 1998, I think it was May of 98. Those who know a little bit about tornado climatology of the Northeast remember May 31st, 1985.
Oh, absolutely.
As by far the biggest modern tornado outbreak in Pennsylvania. But there was another mini outbreak. That May 31st is a crazy weather day in Pennsylvania.
That's my birthday.
You had another tornado outbreak in 1998 on that date. I'm pretty sure it was 98. And then, of course, and I'm pretty sure I have this right. Remember the big dam break in Johnstown in
1888?
1889, maybe? I think it was on May 31st.
So that's a bad day in Pennsylvania weather history.
The worst weather day in the history of Pennsylvania is May 31st.
That's right. That's right.
So,
1889, May 31st. That's right.
Yeah, I was only at the Franklin Institute for 5 years. So what comes to mind immediately to me is Floyd. I just remember not being able to get home. There were too many trees knocked down. In fact, I got home and there was a tree down in my front yard, which my wife was kind enough not to tell me because she didn't want to worry me, because it didn't hit anything. But it was a big tree.
And so Johnstown is extremely famous with 1899, but there was another huge flood there in 1977.
Yes.
So talk about that flood for a minute.
Yeah, Johnstown had another one in the 70s there. That was just a fairly stationary mesoscale convective complex. Yeah.
So talk about your relationship with Glenn Schwartz, and I know he was co-author with you on the book. That had to be a lot of fun writing it, didn't it, Dr. John?
Yeah, that was a blast. I mean, the idea came to me almost immediately getting to Philadelphia. I noticed that there was so much weather history in that city. And of course, then you've got the shore, both the Jersey Shore and the Delaware Shore, the whole, and then you go north, you've got the Poconos. So, and a lot of that is in the book, but we focus on the Philadelphia area. But I figured, look, I had little to no credibility in the Philadelphia market in 1998. I was new to the area. So Glenn was a Penn State graduate. I knew him peripherally, but not that well. And the Franklin Institute had this program whereby, as I mentioned earlier, they would send a meteorologist over and we would do a weather show. So it was just natural to say, hey, would you consider writing a book with me? And my recollection was it was a no-brainer. And I just have great memories, and you're going to find it hard to believe I consider this a great memory, but being in the bowels of the Temple University library, and they called it the archives, going through old photographs. And I mean, you can imagine finding photographs of, the drought of 62, or just every imaginable weather event that had occurred in Philadelphia. There were the pictures in the Temple University archives. And those folks were just great to work with. And they ended up publishing the book, Temple University Press. They were a joy to work with.
So, Dr. John Scala, I don't think we've ever had Glenn Schwartz on this show, if I'm reading our former guest list well. He's still on television in Philadelphia, right?
I think he is, yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
You should get Glenn. He's a hoot.
He's a hoot. That's right.
He is on every day, working a midday and early evening shift.
So we might could get him on then, huh, Nate Johnson?
We could probably work that.
You got connections now?
I know a few people.
Is that one of your stations? Is that
one of my stations?
This is easy for you.
They just moved
booking
into
officer will be taking the week off that week.
They just moved into the what I call the TV Taj Mahal. They're on 3 floors of the brand spanking new Comcast Technology Center on Arch Street in Center City, Philadelphia. And I've been in a lot of television stations, and let me tell you, this one, it's pretty. Here's a cool thing, by the way, just a random TV thing. There's not a single piece of video cable in that television station.
Wow.
It's all IPTV.
Wow.
First one. So, anyway, I'll work on getting a Hurricane on. I think he'd be a hoot to have on the show.
So now, how did he come by the nickname?
Well,
ask him.
Well, as he tells it, Glenn worked at the Weather Channel at one time.
Right.
And he has told me that he was one of the first, if not their first, sort of hurricane chaser. And I mean, there's a video from, I want to say, circa 1985 of him in shorts on the beach in Tampa, and it's terrifying.
Probably Hurricane Elena, I
bet. Oh, you're killing me.
I believe that's accurate, but I'm sure he'll either verify or tell you that's just legend, but I'm pretty sure
he will neither confirm nor deny.
Right.
He also was worked at WRAL many years ago.
Of course.
Wow.
Nate, you're going to be the new official broadcast meteorology historian before all this is over. So, Dr. John, you were kind enough to have us up to when we were there for the Alabama Penn State game several years ago.
Yeah.
And got to tailgate with you, and that was a lot of fun. And it's always worried me since then. Can I still get a peachy paterno in the creamery?
Yes, you can. The ice cream is available 24/7, 365.
24/7. I didn't realize that. That's
well, no,
cool.
It's not really. No, I use that term loosely. I'm sure that the creamery closes, but yeah, you can. And you got to come back. In fact, you should all come up and take in a game.
It was one of the most fun football games I've ever been to, and Dr. John Scala resulted in us getting there on time. And by on time, I mean lined up at 7 a.m. at the pancake place there on College Street. Or what's the name of it, Dr. Neese? The place
Let's see.
Pancakes.
Oh, geez. You can tell I don't go there very often. Only when kids are in town.
We did college. We did it with State College extremely well while we were there.
Right.
Meanwhile, every Penn State graduate who's watching the program is screaming the name of it at their computer right now.
That's
The
exactly
waffle
right.
shop.
Oh, there you go. Well, I had,
The waffle shop.
of course, none of my, Alabama fans that were along with me wanted to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning to drive from Harrisburg, where we were under a boil water advisory because there had been a tremendous flood the week before. It flooded Hershey Park and the zoo and was terrible. And I mean, literally, we couldn't drink the water. And I met Dr. John Scala for hamburgers the night before, and he said, "Don't go the route your GPS is going to tell you to State College. Go up the west side of the river or something like that."
Sure.
And only because of that, there were lots of Alabama fans that didn't get to the game because I don't think they gave that to all the other Alabama fans. We were in the know. They sold their tickets before they got there.
Would that have been 2011, right?
That was 2011.
Tropical Storm Lee.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
right.
Okay.
Yeah, that tropical storm. There's a big fair in Pennsylvania. It's very, very well known. It's called the Bloomsburg Fair, and much of the fairgrounds is right along the Susquehanna River. And they canceled it that year, which had never happened before because of weather. Yeah, that was Tropical Storm Lee.
Yeah, if you look at the stats from that day, I think that was September 8th, 2011. It was a record 24-hour rainfall. It set the record for the month, and it was only September the 8th, and it broke the annual record.
Wow.
So that year, I think Harrisburg ended up with 72 inches of rain, which is like 30 inches above average.
Right.
And how does that compare to this year, Dr. John?
Well, now that you mention it, with the government shutdown ending, the numbers really just came out officially today. 2018 was the wettest year on record for Pennsylvania statewide.
It was, yeah, because it certainly was here in Lancaster.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a number of local places such as Lancaster, Reading, Johnstown, State College. It was the wettest year on record.
Right.
Well, that is all very, very cool. So
I'm gonna have to take off. I've got to lead the show tonight, and I've got to get ready. So it was.
You go, Aubrey. You got a pick of the week for us before you leave?
I don't. I'm gonna have to take the foghorn on that one.
I got plenty for you.
All right, there you go. John's got one.
Dr. John,
I got plenty for her.
And Dr. Neese, I'm gonna have to come up. And I was looking at the Franklin Institute online, and it looks pretty awesome. I've got a cousin who lives in Philly, so
there you go.
I love weather history, so yeah, I'm gonna have to get up there.
You've got friends and family in every market in America.
I do. I know someone almost everywhere, so we love to travel.
And you don't know it yet, Aubrey, but you're one of the guest weather brains for the show that's coming up on
March something.
Sometime in there, March the 18th.
A birdie may have told me.
Okay, good.
The Scott Martin may have already made sure that I was going to be around. So
okay, good.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. All right, guys. Well, I know a lot of us are tired. A lot of us have a long night ahead of us. Dr. John, anything else you want to make sure we talk about before we get ready to wind this down for the night?
The only thing I can think of is, of course, Saturday's Groundhog Day.
That's right. Have you ever been down to see Puxatawny Field?
Yeah. 2 years ago, I made my first trip. Got media passes, so I got a good parking spot.
There you go. That sounds like something for the weather bucket list.
I mean, the whole thing is just fun. I mean, it's just, I even have had Punxsutawney Phil. We've even invited him to Penn State twice. So he was up to the university in 2008, and then he visited again. I think it was 2016. We had him into the meteorology department. He bites, let me tell you. His handlers, they wear these gloves that are made out of
steel gloves, right? Yeah.
Similar material.
They're fearsome little critters, and peacocks are mean too. Speaking of animals that show up on television from time to time, they're just downright hateful little things.
I'll tell you what else is. If you've ever been to the Southwest, you know what a javelina is?
Oh, yeah.
Troy. These are mean
Troy has a
animals.
pet javelina.
John, you talk about that. One time, my dad, who's an avid hunter in South Texas here, and he had these things treat him up in a deer blind for a couple of hours at a time. They would not let him come down out of the deer blind. They were going to get him in that deer blind. So absolutely in South Texas.
I was running down a road.
John?
What was that?
What do they look like? What do they resemble?
They look like hogs.
Yeah, they're hogs. Yeah.
Okay.
They look like hogs. And I was running down a road outside Tucson a number of years ago. I'm the only person out there. There's not even a car. And I'm running down through this wash. And I think there was a family of javelinas. And I unknowingly ran by them. And this thing was snorting at me and running down the highway after me.
John, you threatened them. You threatened their existence, and they came after you.
Apparently so.
Well, Troy, I know you got to get out of here and do some radio early.
Yeah,
early in the morning. So why don't you share anything you want to share? Maybe give us a pick of the week.
I'm gonna just a big. I don't know how you say it because we've all said it the last few weeks, but big hats off to all of our colleagues in the National Weather Service who have had to work for the last month without a paycheck. We've heard the stories. We talked about it last week about weather service people. Our weather service forecast is good because of this. That's a bunch of, I won't say what that's a bunch of, but you can figure that out. We talked about that. Weather service people have worked very hard, and my hat off to those people who really put up with a lot. And also, I say weather service people, government all the way around. I was through the airport, and I talked to some of the TSA people in Memphis and Houston and Austin here in the last couple of days, and they were in unusually good, even before the announcement was made, good mood. And so hats off to those people. My pick of the week this week is something, guys, that we've all done. Both our Dr. Johns have used this before, but the folks out there are watching. If you're into climate numbers and climate stuff, really get over there. And it's easy as going to your weather service to their web page. And I've entered ours for down in New Braunfels or Austin, San Antonio office, and get in there and go to the climate and past weather tab. That's usually they have it off the top page, and look at that now data. If you've never been around in there, it's part of the XMACIS thing that is set up through the region. Yeah, and it's the regional climate centers have worked on this. And folks, you want to see some interesting stuff. You get in there and you can get absolutely, I think both of my Johns here would agree, you can get in there and get just buried in that stuff. You can look and look and look and find some of the most interesting things in history. And as much heck as I give the Weather Service sometimes on web page and continuity and stuff like that, this is really kind of a neat thing. Again, underneath current or climate and past weather on that tab on the page, and you can go down there, any Weather Service office in the United States.
That's my favorite stuff.
Absolutely.
Boy, thank you for sharing that. That's really good. But thank you for being here tonight. That's awesome. Nate Johnson, you got a pick of the week? Anything else you want to bring before this august group?
I do. A friend of mine, Eric Sorensen at WQAD, the Quad Cities news and weather leader, posted a very simple, very straightforward recap of what the weather is going to do, and basically says, look, it's going to be 26 degrees below zero Wednesday morning with a wind chill of 55 below, and you will need medical attention for frostbite in 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. That's it. No, this is serious. I mean, we sometimes joke about, well, don't tell people, people know what to do when it's hot outside and just, go in the shade, drink lots of water, This is legitimate, dangerous cold. It's something that it's not a normal annual thing. It's not an even regular thing. I think it's something that we really need to pay attention to. And I rank this right up there with hurricanes and tornadoes. This is the kind of stuff that we can really play a role in helping people be ready for as best we can, and trying to use our bully pulpit on television and on social media and on radio to convince people just to stay home if they can, to really take precautions, because this really can be a dangerous thing.
But Nate, I would tell you, as you do that, promotional message about how nice Austin, Texas is. It's 49.6 degrees right now.
Yeah, but you got all those Longhorns down there. And my Aggie wife just doesn't. Had to go there. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Gig 'em.
Yep. Gig 'em.
All right. Kevin, you got a pick of the week, I bet.
I do. Yes, I also am very excited. I'm so glad that Troy is here now because it sets me up to retire, and he can now become the accelerant and the grumpy one on the show. Since
are you having official concession training?
The grumpy one?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is you're setting yourself up to to take over for me, and that's great.
I could never take over for Kevin.
No. You're doing a wonderful job. Anyway,
I hate Twitter.
Anyway, I stumbled across an old Nova program. It may be as much as 2 years old, but it has some of our friends on it. Marshall Shepard's in it, and Paul Douglas plays a role. It's an old Nova PBS program called Decoding the Climate Machine, and it was really good. So that's my pick.
Outstanding. We're glad you're here tonight. Glad we got to your pick of the week. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Dr. John, I guess you've seen the trend here, Dr. John Neese. We asked for some pick of the week, some website or book or journal article or something, an app, anything that you would like to share with the audience tonight. Do you have anything for us?
Well, I guess I mentioned this before. I have an archive of approximately 500 educational features that I've done over the years that have aired on our Weather World show here, and I think there's a variety there that would appeal to just about anyone. I mean, I've done a lot related to sports, how Major League Baseball does not have a lightning policy, for example. Why would anyone hold a Super Bowl in New Jersey? Topics like that, as well as some scientific topics. Anyway, you could just find the archive by typing my name into Google, followed by the word WeatherWise, WeatherWhys, John Neese WeatherWise. And it's not the flashiest web page. In fact, it's not flashy at all, but you could just do a search for a keyword. I bet you'd find something you'd enjoy.
Well, Flash won't work on most of our Macs anyway. So
there you go.
So anything else you want to add before we let you go? How can folks get in touch with you, Dr. Neese?
Well, Google my name, but my email address is J2N, J for John, the number 2, the letter N, at psu.edu for Penn State University. If you're in the area, would love to show you around our department and our studios, and I really appreciate the invitation to be on the show.
It's been a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it ever since I heard we were going to have you on. That's great stuff. So thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome.
Dr. John Scala, it's been a little confusing having two Dr. Johns tonight, even though they're spelled differently. Keeps everybody on their toes, I guess. I'm sure you got several great picks of the week.
I had several in there, but first let me say thank you to John. It's been great to catch up with you. It's been a while since I've been up to Penn State and sat around and talked with you, so I got to do it again.
I agree, John. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so Bill, I was thinking back to last week. We were talking about, it was a wicked, at that point, it was a wicked cold outbreak on that Monday, the 21st. And we were talking about the conditions at Mount Washington. And they actually had a sustained wind of 122 gusting to 137 on that Monday. So I thought, well, my pick of the week is going to be the link to the current obs at Mount Washington. And right now it's a balmy 11.6 with a wind chill of -3, which will be quite warm compared to what will be in Chicago in the next 24 to 36 hours.
Have you ever been up there, John?
No, I'm a member of Mount Washington, and it's on my bucket list. I got to get there.
Yeah, you need to do it. I've driven the road, and it's just awesome. It's just awesome to be there, as a weather geek. But the drive is fantastic, and obviously the view is wonderful. So yeah, definitely do it.
Now, what can you do if you're just a general layperson? If you get to the top, what's available for you to do once you arrive up there, Kevin?
Well, you can wander around that big building where all the weather instruments are. And gosh, it's been many years now since I've been. So I'm trying to think. There's some historical things up there as well. I mean, originally, I think there was just um, some sort of a hut, made out of stones that were collected from around the top, as opposed to hauling stuff up. But that facility that is there now is really cool. I was there in the warmer months. I think we've talked. It was on a show years ago that we did here. They have these things. I assume they still have them called edu trips. You can go up in the wintertime, take one of the snowcats up there and stay for a couple of days, and those are supposed to be awesome as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, all right, I think we're all caught up, aren't we? So I guess they just added 2 counties to our winter storm warning. So I'm going to go do a little blog work and get ready to do the video for James in the morning. So unless there's anything else here, I'd make a recommendation that we adjourn and put another WeatherBrains in the can. WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We were the first one, and we're still standing. National Weather Podcast Month will be coming up in March. We're really excited about that. A lot of our podcasts that have sort of made it through the veil here are celebrating this month. I think there are 5 of us left standing at this point. And we're going to have Dr. John Scala up here on the Carolina Weather Gang on the 27th. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have one of their panelists on every week during that month. And we got some special shows planned, ending with Dr. Chuck Doswell on the 25th of March. So I think
that should be good.
Yeah. So I'm going to be in Ireland. So y'all are going to be on your own.
No,
man.
you gotta steal some internet for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What time will it be during the
It
show?
doesn't matter.
5 in the morning. Yeah.
It'll be the next day.
You will be joining WeatherBrains from the future.
I will let y'all know what's happening so you can get the forecasts right. And I'm just hoping we get this forecast right tonight. I still see a lot of rain on our radar and not much snow. So
yeah,
it's going to be an interesting morning. So I may be in hiding come tomorrow. I'll be in the witness protection program. So.
Well, one thing, Bill, that I was noticing a couple minutes ago, kind of following the weather in North Mississippi, Memphis originally had out a winter weather advisory up there, and I think they've canceled it because the temperature has not fallen as much in Corinth and Tupelo in that area of Northeast Mississippi, and so that one's out.
Yeah, that's I'm getting nervous, and the rain is faster. The moisture is well into western Alabama now, and the cold air is going to have to get on its giddy up if it wants to catch up with this moisture. So,
is school canceled already?
Oh yeah, school's been canceled all day. So we will. Our name will be mud come 7:30 in the morning. So anyway, and the Weather Service in Birmingham is issuing new winter storm warnings. So let's hope they're right. We're counting on it. So all right, gentlemen. So till we get together again next Monday night, I'll bid you adieu. Hope you have a great week. Keep an eye to the sky because you'll always have something fun to look at. All right, gentlemen. I guess we're done. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
See you.
Thanks, John.
Great
All that
show,
Penn
guys.
State memorabilia. We should have to explain a lot of the significance of it. All right, guys. Bye. See you later.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. Sorry to cut out early tonight, but I love it in a way because I get to listen to the show and I've not heard it before. So thank you all for watching. We'll see y'all next Monday night. I got to go deal with some winter storm panic of our 1 to 2 inches down here. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night. Bye-bye.